Hello, and welcome to Live and Invest Overseas podcasts. My name is Kat Kalashian. I'm an editor for Live and Invest Overseas, and I am the new host of these little videos that we're going to be sending out. I thought I might take a few minutes this week to introduce myself and give you a bit of background on what we're doing here. I'm a lifelong expat. I'm currently living here in Paris, France, where we have a little LIOS office, Live and Invest Overseas office. And here we're going to be spending some time together every week talking about all things living, investing, retiring overseas. So thanks for being with us today. I'm also the daughter of Kathleen Petticord and Leif Simon. If you're familiar with their publications, you'll probably know their names. It's probably how you found your way to this little corner of the internet. You may be familiar with some of their newsletters or some of our other publications here at Live and Invest Overseas. I am the Europe correspondent for Live and Invest Overseas. I'm based here in Paris, and I spend my time pre-COVID, I spent my time scouting around for new places to introduce you to. I write our bi-monthly In Focus Europe newsletter, which is, of course, about all things Europe. And I also write our weekly free Live and Invest Overseas confidential newsletter, which is full of insider information and advance offers on our conferences that we hold all over the world. To give you a little bit of my background as an expat, I began my overseas adventures at the age of 8 when my mother, Kathleen, and Leif moved to Ireland. We lived there for about 7 years. My brother was born shortly after we arrived. We bought a big old Georgian house, renovated it. We got a dog and a cat, and then some chickens and some horses. We, used to have cows grazing on our pastures in the summertime, and we'd bale up the grass as hay in the fall. So in short, we fully embraced a rural lifestyle in Ireland while we were there. However, I wasn't a fan. I did not love rural Ireland and the life that we led there. And so when I was 14, in Ireland, when you're 14, it's 10th grade, I believe. It's colloquially known as a DOS year or a transition year. And it's basically a time when the Irish give kids a chance to do something other than traditional schooling, to give them some life experience, to see, maybe what career path they want to follow before they come back, finish high school, and set themselves on a university path. I decided that I was going to go to boarding school in Paris for this year. So I started doing research. I made my announcement to my family. My mom and I took a trip over to Paris. We looked at some schools. And then somewhere in the process of all of this and the talking about it, my family decided that they were also ready to move on from Ireland and that Paris seemed like a great idea. So we all ended up moving over here together. To this day, I'm not really sure what put the idea in my head, other than that I always had liked Paris when I had visited here, and it was a city that was close by Ireland. So, it was an easy mental transition to just go across the channel and come over here to Paris. Probably had a little something to do with reading Madeline books as a kid. But regardless, the search changed from boarding schools to regular schools. We started looking at homes here. And so we ended up moving to Paris's 7th arrondissement after some not quite so comfortable temporary housing situations. Imagine a four-person family living in a very, very, very small single bedroom apartment. That's where we were living for several months until we found our permanent home here. But, Paris is where I went to high school. It's where I learned French, my second language. I discovered literature and art and great food and good music. I found some of the best friends that I've to this day made in my life. New York, I did eventually go back to the States for New York and university, but funnily going to the US was probably a bigger culture shock and transition for me than either of my 2 moves in Europe. So as soon as I graduated, I left the United States again. I went down to Panama this time. It was my job that took me, not just wanderlust, but my husband, my then boyfriend, now husband, was also in Panama at the time. And if you know anything about Live and Invest Overseas, you know that our headquarters are down there in Panama. And as I say, it's where my boyfriend was. He was working for Live and Invest Overseas at the time. So it made sense. We lived there for 7 years. I brought my cat with me from the US down to Panama. In Panama, we got a dog. When we most recently moved back to Paris, I had to import both of those animals with me over here again, which is a process. But honestly, the whole time that I was living overseas, I wanted to get back to Paris. When people ask me, you know, what are your plans after university, or you know, what are your career plans? My only answer really was just that I'm living to get back to Paris. I'm living life, doing whatever I've got to do to figure out how to get myself back over to the city that I fell in love with as a kid. Honestly, I would have probably preferred never to have left Paris. But now with a little bit of hindsight, it is wonderful to see all of the experiences that I've had overseas along the way and how they've, you know, given me the appreciation for life that I have now being back in Paris. And there's a little bit of a lesson wrapped up in there. You know, we'll talk a lot about these kinds of things in future podcasts, but it's something to take away from my little story is that the first stop you make isn't always the last stop. And maybe it's not your final stop. Maybe it doesn't end up working out for you in the short term or in the long term. But this living overseas thing, it doesn't have to be a one-way street. You know, it's not jumping off a cliff and you can never get back up the other side of the mountain. You know, you can just roll with the punches, as it were, and see what you like best and what you don't like best about a place, and see if you want to move on after a while. So that's how I see my various moves overseas, that they were all, you know, wonderful adventures that I had. And while I definitely love Paris and, you know, was looking forward to getting back here my whole life, you know, I wouldn't trade in all of those experiences that I had for having lived in Paris all of those interim years. And it's perfectly okay to make some mistakes, you know, to live in a place that isn't your perfect Shangri-La for a little bit. And it helps you get to know yourself a little better to find where your next stop might be. So what finally got me back here to Paris, it was actually deciding to start a family. My husband, Ben, and I were in Panama, and Zika was a big concern down there. We wanted to start a family, and it didn't seem like Panama was the right place for us to do that with the Zika threat. And we also wanted to just put down some roots, and we felt like we were ready to move on from Panama. So France has excellent healthcare. That was one of my, in the practical column, if you make columns of reasons that I wanted to live back in Paris, most of them aren't practical. Most of them were just because I want to, because I love it. But there were some practical reasons. And one of those is great healthcare, a really great healthcare system. I really like the way that the French approached parenting and family life, and how the French balance the work-life balance here in France is much more successful, I would say, in my own opinion, than it is in the US. So we arrived in Paris in December 2018, as I said, with my cat, my American cat, my Panamanian dog, and as many suitcases as we were allowed to bring with us at the time. And we lived for our first year in the 11th arrondissement, which is a fantastic part of the city. I highly recommend it. It's a little bit unknown. It's a little bit less expensive, and certainly not a tourist area. So it's a great place to get started if you are interested in Paris. I have to put in my little upsells for Paris wherever I can. Anyway, it's a very vibrant, socially active part of the city. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too socially active for a pregnant woman and family with a very young baby. So almost immediately I got pregnant, and we decided we didn't want to live in the party district anymore. The street we were living on in particular was a very loud party street, so it wasn't really working for us. So if you're looking for a quiet, tranquil neighborhood to raise your first child in, for example, I would not recommend the 11th arrondissement necessarily. We have since moved to the 7th arrondissement, which is much more central in the middle of the city, right off the river, and it suits us perfectly at this point in our lives. But again, these things are all so fluid and changeable. It was not a good place. You know, when we first moved to Paris, we would have never lived in the 7th. 10 years from now, when we are not as concerned about having babies in our house, you know, we might not still like being in the 7th. So, as I'm saying, this living overseas thing, you get to know that there are phases in life, and you just have to kind of follow them and figure out what works for that phase. And the same thing doesn't work all the time. So I'll leave that to the side. We'll talk plenty more about Parisian neighborhoods. I'm very sure about all of the ins and outs of how to find the right place, whether that's a country or a street to live on, from the macro to the micro. We'll talk all about that stuff in future episodes, I'm sure. So I don't want to get sidetracked here. But again, I can't help pointing out the little lesson here that, it's not just the country or the city that might be right. It might be the neighborhood. It might even be, as I say, the street I lived on was a very loud street. A few streets over wasn't the same way, or at the other end of the block wasn't the same way. So you have to be a little bit flexible when you're moving overseas. And I think people can forget that. So it's a good lesson to keep in mind. This living overseas thing, it is not a smoothly paved, perfectly straight road. It's an adventure, it's got lots of twists and turns and detours and hurdles and obstacles. But if you're here and you're listening to these podcasts, if you're familiar with our Live and Invest Overseas publications, I think that's probably what you're looking for in life. You're looking for something that isn't the usual thing. You're looking for something that's different than the life you've been leading every day up until now. You want something, a little new, unexpected, exotic, unfamiliar. And so I guess my overall point, if you want to take a lesson from my introduction, is that you should never become discouraged with your less than perfect experiences, because there will be a lot. I've been doing this almost my entire life, and I've still not learned from all of the life lessons that I should have learned from by now. I'm still trying to take to heart. But what is really fun about all of these obstacles and all these little things that you weren't expecting that may be frustrating in the moment is that it's part of the fun. It means that you're living a discovery every day. You can't expect to know what is going to happen when you wake up every day. And that's the way I like it. I like variety in life. Honestly, one of the reasons I didn't like living in Panama after so many years was because there was very little variety in the year. You don't get seasons. You don't get changes in daylight hours. You're living on the equator. Things are pretty much all the same all the time. And that's just not that interesting to me. So I'll go to Panama for a few months of the year. But I think I'm done with the tropics at this point in my life. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't lived there for so long. And again, I appreciate Paris the way that I do now, if not for all of those years in Manhattan and in Panama and in Ireland and everywhere else. Unfortunately, my personal move back to Paris, which I had been waiting for so long for, was perfectly timed to coincide with COVID. I got pregnant, as I say, almost as soon as we arrived here in France. So my whole first year was taken up with a pregnancy. It wasn't the easiest one, so I didn't get out of the house much, didn't get out of the country much as I expected we would. That was honestly one of the other practical reasons that I wanted to be living in Paris, is because I love to travel. And what better place than to be located in, probably the most central, biggest city in Western Europe for me to launch me into all the other cities and countries that I want to explore. And it's also economical to be in the heart of Europe if Europe is the place that you want to be exploring. So I didn't get to do as much as I was expecting. Again, nothing is ever as you imagine it will be. When I was choosing to come back to Paris, I didn't think we'd be stuck indoors for pregnancy for the first year and then for COVID for the following 2 years, more or less. Literally the month my daughter was born, the world shut down for COVID. So I don't necessarily feel like I've been taking advantage of my time here in Europe. And I'm sure if any of you have been working on this moving overseas thing and COVID has, just erupted in the middle of it, like a big, nasty old volcano in the middle of all your plans, you might be getting a little frustrated too. And, all I can say is chins up and eyes forward. And we hope that the world gets a little bit easier. But I will say, even though things are more complicated, probably more frustrating on the travel front, it is still possible. The world is still a big, huge, beautiful place. I still want to get out to see as much of it as I can whenever I'm allowed to. And I hope to see many of our readers and our listeners and our viewers and at some of our country conferences in the future. So again, things don't turn out the way you expect. I haven't been able to go to cafes, museums, do all the things that I plan to do. All the things were the reason I'm here. The past couple years have been challenging for us all. So no matter where you were or are in this move overseas process, don't give up. There's still plenty of opportunity out there. And that's what we're here to do at these podcasts, is to help present you with the opportunities that are still available, the best ways that you can get overseas, the places you can live more affordably, more comfortably, more, enjoy life more, live a healthier, more active lifestyle. So many benefits to living overseas once you found the place that you want to live. So don't give up. There is still plenty to do out there. And hopefully some of these little videos that we're putting together at Live and Invest Overseas will help you get out there. They'll help inspire and motivate and give you some practical, real world tools to figure out how to move to another country, whether that's now or in a year or in 5 years or in 30 years, because it never hurts to plan ahead. So what can you expect from these podcasts? We'll deliver you some fun interviews with expats from all over the world. People, hopefully some of my expat friends here in Paris will be able to come in and join us in studio here. I have my chair for having little fireside chats. Hopefully our COVID confinement restrictions won't keep us from having a co-host in the future. But we'll have, virtual interviews as well. We'll be doing remote interviews with expats, but also with, people like real estate agents to talk about what it's like to find a rental overseas, or what you can expect to be in a purchase contract overseas. People like lawyers and tax advisors, people that, you might not think have the most exciting things to say, but they're definitely things that are worth your while. They, are invaluable pieces of advice and information. So from the expats, you'll get that, lighthearted, the funny stories, the embarrassing stories, all the little anecdotes, all the insider tips, the things that you don't know unless you've been living there, and the things that maybe the locals aren't so eager to share, if they're not the best things. Because here at Live and Invest Overseas, one of our biggest sayings, one of our greatest mottos is warts and all. We know that no place is perfect. We know that everybody is different and every place is different, and you're never going to find a place that suits you perfectly. As much as I love Paris, and as much as I think it may be one of the more perfect cities in the world for me, there's still plenty of things that I, if I had a magic wand, I would love to change some things. And you have to learn to put up with the bad and appreciate the good. So you'll hear all of those things. You'll hear the bad and the good from the expats, from the experts. As I say, you're also going to hear a lot more on the practical side of things, the actionable side of things. So many of these expat podcasts, they're really fun and lighthearted, and it's cute and it's fun to listen to, but you don't ever really walk away with a sense of knowing or feeling like you could do this for yourself. So while I do hope to inspire and motivate, I want you to also feel like maybe not after every single podcast, but hopefully after hearing them, you'll actually walk away feeling you could do this yourself, because absolutely anybody can. I will invite our most trusted attorneys, real estate agents, developers, healthcare professionals, tax advisors, all local to their own part of the world. Or if, for example, a US or Canadian tax advisor would have to be local to the US or Canada. These are the things that we're taking into consideration when we're giving you the advice, because it doesn't do you any good to hear what some real estate agent in Michigan is going to tell you about buying real estate in Portugal. They have no idea. So we're here with we will be here with all of our vetted experts that we've been working with sometimes for decades, and who we know have been given great referrals. And who are highly thought of throughout all of our contacts, all of our network. And so we'll really get into the nitty gritty of it all. I can't promise that every single podcast is going to be fun or funny, but I can promise that they will all be as important and as invaluable as the next. We'll talk about money, how much it costs to live in various parts of the world, in great detail. We do line by line budgets, and these are coming from people who are living there on the ground. These are their actual monthly invoices, if you will. And we'll also turn our attention to real estate on occasion. We can't forget the invest side of live and invest overseas, because there are great opportunities out there, ways to make money that you might not even be familiar with if you're from the United States or Canada. And of course, as we always say, warts and all, you're going to hear about it all, the good and the bad. Every place has its annoyances, and every person has their pet peeves. We do our best to draw all of those out for you and give you the information that you need to make an informed decision. I'll also take questions anytime that we get any. So please send us in any comments or questions or concerns you have about any of these ideas. We get plenty of, I was going to say letters, but we get plenty of emails at Leos already. So there's no shortage of frequently asked questions. I can have a list. We can do a whole day of just question asking. And since I am here in Paris, I am here in Europe, I'm sure that often there will be some specifics, some little things that we'll talk about that are specific to either Europe or to France or to Paris. Hopefully I'll take you out for some field trips, show you what it's like to shop at a market. Right now it's about 30 degrees outside, so it's not a great market day, but hopefully when the spring comes around, we can get outside and take a look at this beautiful city. I can share little bits of it with you and lots more fun stuff here on the streets of Paris. So thank you for joining. I hope this has been informative, and I really hope that you'll come back and listen to us again. Thanks.